Hi, and welcome to episode number 77 of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast, the show where I talk to introverts who grow their business and make a difference. I'm Sarah Zinacroce, and so excited that you are here with me today. I'm actually about to leave, or as you're listening to this, I might already be in Crete for a 1-week family vacation over Easter, and I'm looking forward to it. Last time I was in Crete was when I was 17 or 18, and besides the nightclubs and the Vespa we rented with 2 girlfriends, I don't remember that much of the culture and, sights and all of that, so looking forward to it. I have a wonderful conversation for you today with Mariana, but first I'd like to tell you about a free online workshop I have coming up upon my return on April 26th. In this free 60-minute workshop, I'll walk you through my 1-page marketing plan and show you how to plan your next product or service launch so you can market it without anxiety. This is something completely new that I'm putting together, and the process is straightforward, simple, beautiful, and not at all dry because I've come up with my own version of the 7 P's of marketing. That is why the 1-page canvas can be so powerful and transformative. So if you'd like to join us, it's happening on Friday, April 26th at, I believe it's 9 a.m. Eastern. You can sign up at sarahsantacroce.com/1, so in letters, ONE -page. So sarahsantacroce.com/1page. And you must attend live. So this is not your typical webinar where you just sign up and hope for the replay. You really must attend live to gain access to the workshop. No replays will be provided. So clear your calendar and attend if you know this is speaking to you. And I'm sharing this with my community because I really want your business to succeed. And in order to do that, I'd like you to be able to market it with authenticity and anxiety-free. At the end of the presentation, I'll also reveal the content of my new anxiety-free marketing program, which starts in its 2nd beta round on May 6th. I really hope to see you there. But now back to today's guest. Mariana is a certified business coach and consultant and international best-selling author. She helps seasoned coaches and consultants scale their business by creating and launching their profitable group coaching programs. She uses her background in brain science, hospital administration, and 12 years of marketing, sales, and business experience to help you get results for your clients at scale, market in a way that attracts your ideal clients, and convert followers to group coaching clients through service-based selling. She has been featured in various podcasts, blogs, and online courses, including the Huffington Post, Today.com, and the Millionaire Insider Extravaganza. Through working with hundreds of businesses, she has empowered them to increase their profit and serve more people all over the world with group coaching. You can catch her podcast, The Impact Driven Entrepreneur, on her site, impactdrivenentrepreneur.com. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Mariana. Hi, Mariana. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
Yeah, it's an honor. I think we booked this interview last year. So I was like, yay, finally, we can talk to each other.
Yeah.
So I'm excited. Well, wonderful. Well, I just read the official bio in the intro, but sometimes they're a bit stiff. I'm not saying yours is stiff, but we write those bios, right? And what I want to do is I want to go behind the bio and really find out about who you are and also how being an introvert and running this business that you are running, how that, kind of impacts the way you do business. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so it's so funny. Okay, so let me go back to how I got started with business, if that's okay.
Yeah,
and then my background is in nursing. I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, but I have 2 parents who are both college professors. So it really sends you down this rabbit hole of like wanting to please your parents and also go down academic routes, for me anyways. And so I did that, and I started with a psychology degree, and then I really wanted to practice right away. And I realized that with psychology, I wouldn't really be able to do that. And I was really more into the structures of the brain than I was about all of the mental health, and mental illness side. So I went down the nursing route and ended up working in brain surgery, which is like tons of introverts working there. I'll just say that, right? Like there's nothing like a neurosurgeon.
I have never had one on the shows.
So so that field was really, really intellectually stimulating for me, but physically draining because it was very, very long hours and just like all hours of the night and day working. And so I eventually decided to climb up the corporate ladder, and I was in hospital administration. I was going to oversee 3 hospitals. My supervisor had asked me, and that same week I gave birth to my daughter, who was a preemie, just 28 weeks old and weighing 2 pounds. So kind of like this weird course that like your life takes, and you're like, oh my gosh, everything I've built for all these years just kind of like completely shifted. Now, because I had that internal entrepreneur aspect to myself, I already had a side coaching business. So I had the side coaching business, and I just went all in with that while taking care of my daughter. And it was very hard for me because having to sell when you aren't used to selling and you're just used to the service side of a business was very difficult for me. And I think that's when like the introvert in me was like really struggling, because it was like, oh my gosh, I have to be out there. I have to be on video. I have to, show up and market and sell my business and what I do. But I have no idea how to do it at the time. I was like, I had done some sales to get me through nursing school, but I didn't feel like I was like a salesperson, And then the other piece was, having to work through that internal dialogue of, do I look okay on camera? Am I saying the right thing? And like all of that. So I really I think it was the situation and the circumstance of like, okay, I could either hire an ICU nurse to come and watch my daughter at home, because even when she came home on breathing monitors and machines and was like needing intensive care from me 24/7. So I thought, okay, I can either hire a nurse or I can just like show up, and luckily I'm trained to do this, So I decided that like that was worth it for me to get to be with my daughter during that time and to be her sole provider and just like really take care of her. And that was enough of a driver for me to be like, I know I have all these introvert stories and I'm willing to do this for my daughter.
Wow. How lucky was your daughter to be born into a family where, you had this knowledge, you were able to take care of her, right? Anyone else would have had to have her at the hospital, I guess.
Way longer. Yeah. I was very blessed in that, in having, getting her to be home. And even though she would have had to stay at least another 3 months until she came off those monitors.
Wow.
So, yeah.
So what happened after? So you took care of your daughter for, I guess, a year, or how long did you?
Yeah, she was on monitors for, the first 68 days. So the first 2 months, 2.5 months or whatever. The first 2.5 months she was in the hospital. And then when she came home, I was taking care of her while working on my business.
So basically I'm trying to see where you're at. So you just had this huge opportunity to oversee 3 hospitals, right? Then all of a sudden your daughter was born early. And at the same time, you're like, okay, I'm not pursuing the hospital avenue. I'm building my own business. Am I getting this right? Is this all?
Yes. I already had like a coaching business I was doing on the side.
The side business.
Yeah. Because
focused on completely. Wow.
Yeah. It was just a side thing. And, it was kind of one of those things, like I've always been an entrepreneur. I've always wanted to do business and I always wanted to do things my way. And so as like I loved hospital administration, but you have no control, right? It's like the people from the top are telling you, this is what you have to do. This is this, and this. And I wanted a little bit more control. And that's how I even got started with doing my side business. And at the time my daughter was born, my son was only 16 months. So I had another child that I was kind of like, okay, maybe someday like my business would allow me to have more flexible schedule than what I have at the hospital. But it was never something that I thought was going to happen that quickly or that suddenly.
Right. So what I find interesting is how before you said you were surrounded by all these introverts, and then all of a sudden you were in this role where now you had to go out there and promote your business. And so you did that, and now you're actually helping other entrepreneurs promote their business and get sales. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So basically what happened is I had no choice but to sell.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was like, okay, are you going to sell or are you going to go back to the corporate job? And like I said, I worked at GNC, which is like very minimal sales compared to what I do now, but like it was a sales role. So I would make commission on, vitamins and things that I was selling. So I had a very basic understanding of how sales went, what to do, what factors influenced. In fact, it was so funny because when I was working at GNC, I remember the days I would wear my glasses, I would sell way more than the days that I wouldn't wear my glasses.
Great.
And I'm like,
I'm going to run out and buy glasses.
I'm like, how is this even possible?
That is so funny.
So just little things, right? But those little things, and as I started really delving into, because I love brain science, I got into all the psychology of how sales works. And so that all started to really come full circle to me. And like, I got to integrate my passion for the brain and psychology, but then at the same time do it around sales and selling and influence and all of that. For me, it was just kind of like, even though I was in this strange, odd position, like I was really fascinated, especially that brain side, right? It's like, what are the factors, right? Like, how does this work? And like, I went to like old school books, like, influenced by, Robert Cialdini, like old school,
Mm-hmm.
very basic psychological principles. And like, okay, this is really actually quite interesting. And I got to take that more like clinician approach, which has always helped me, right? Like how I was able to process and do the things I did in the hospital was because I took a very clinical approach, right? Instead of it being personal, right? Like if, for example, in the ICU, right, sometimes you get patients in there who are diagnosed brain dead or are about to, right? So instead of me taking it personally, what I would do is say, okay, how can I support and serve this family? What could I do that would help them to, really accept this diagnosis, right? How can I, be a better clinician or supporter for this person? And that like shift for me made it no longer about me and like me trying to process the emotions of what my patient's going through, but instead made it about the family and about service. And that's really what my brand and my business is all about. So my business is called Impact Driven Entrepreneur. And it's about how we can actually sell when we think about things from a place of service.
Right. Yeah, I noticed you had our common friend Farnoosh Brock on the podcast recently, and Farnoosh and I have talked about this on my podcast before, and we kind of keep in touch with each other because I do the same thing on LinkedIn. So I have a program that's called LinkedIn Social Serving, and it's the same thing. It's all, selling. Yeah, you probably heard about social selling before. Well, what I don't like about this term is the word selling, because we don't usually sell on social media. So I transformed it to social serving, and it sounds like you have the same values and it's all about serving your audience. And that's how eventually you get to the sale, right?
Yeah. And I feel like when we think of sales, I mean, traditionally or, through our experience, I mean, for me, this was definitely my story is like sales is something I have to do to someone or like convince them, right? Like, and that's not my approach at all. I think instead what we can do is say, you know what? Like, I know that what we have here is valuable. I also really value and honor that person. Let's see if it's a fit together. And if not, I'm going to like lovingly refer them somewhere else. Or if they have a problem, if not, I don't have any ethical bounds to making sure that they get help, right? But I feel like if someone comes to you with a problem, or for me anyway, I am compelled and like ethically it's my duty to help them fix that problem. Yeah. Whether I can do it or I have to say, you know what, I don't do that, but I'm going to find you someone that will, or I'm going to, actually I can connect you to Sally. She does that, right? And just coming at it from that very loving place so that it's a win-win for that person.
Yeah, exactly. What would you say related to that is kind of your biggest strength as an introverted entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think the biggest strength is probably just being willing to let things come slowly, right? Like, I don't know if that's like an extroverted problem, but my husband's an extrovert, right? And like that patience and like the just allowing that slow change is less his style, right? Than it is for me. But for me, what I do is I just say, you know what, like I'm going to do this for 10 years and I don't care if I make $1 million tomorrow. I'm just here for the long run.
So what has come up before is more, maybe not patience, but definitely consistency and kind of like just sticking with it. I think that's definitely an introvert trait. Yeah.
Yeah. And I try to think of my goals, and especially like more and more and more as the online space is getting louder for us introverts. It's like, how do we, when we don't necessarily want to be loud, how do we stay relevant, right? And for me, what I have found is it's in those true principles of staying with principles, right? So it's not like I sat there and studied, Instagram marketing that's going to make me $20 million tomorrow. I went and studied like principles of psychology, right? It's like, I want things that are going to last. And I think as introverts, like we don't have to be the loudest. We can use our beautiful powers of being like either really powerful or like really wise, right? Like we don't have to be loud. We can just be really knowledgeable or really persistent.
And maybe we can just be different because I think there's a return to, people are kind of done with the loud and, because once you're loud, it's almost like you always have to get louder and louder. And that's what everybody's trying to do. They're getting louder and louder and more ads and more, this and that, where for us, it's like this consistency. And so we're just different, I guess.
Yeah. And that's the thing too, is like, we can just stay with that persistence over time rather than having to be louder. Like, because the loudest person is not always going to be the loudest person. It's going to be outplayed by somebody else. And then they're going to have to take it up a notch. Instead, we're just steady.
Yeah. What would you say then is a challenge, something that till this day you find more challenging because you're introverted?
Yeah, it's still definitely hugely energy management, especially as a mom. So when my kids were home, like before I had them in daycare, it was that like constantly having to be around people. Like, even though they're my children and I love them, I need some time, for myself. And then at one point, when my practice was doing very well, I had 15 one-on-one clients. I had a part-time VA and my 2 kids were under 2, you know?
Wow.
So that energy management was just like the hardest thing for me, and setting those boundaries around, okay, what do I actually need and how can I actually give that to myself, right? With the boundaries and the circumstances that I have, because you can't like give back your kids. So for me, it was, okay, I need to put them in daycare, even though that's a big reason of why I left corporate. But I can do it on my terms, right? I can say I'm going to pick them up at 2:00 on Friday because I want to. I can say I'm only going to take client calls 2 days a week, and the other days are my content creation days. Just that more energy management, and I've just gotten better at tuning into what I need over time, but it's still not perfect.
Yeah, and I think especially as moms, right? And kind of with society pressuring us to be there for our kids, and I'm totally with you. It is hard, even if it's family members, whether it's our kids or our husband, or it's still people. And so sometimes it's hard to crave out that time for ourselves. Yeah, I'm totally with you there. All right. Take us to an aha moment, a place or a time where you had this light bulb go on for yourself in business or in life.
Yeah. So for me, it was when I had those 15 clients.
Right.
And I had, I think 5 calls in one day where I explained a very similar process to all 5 people. And I said, this is just not a good use of my time. Right. And so that was really when I started getting into, how can I make this more effective, more efficient, and more basically introvert friendly, right? Because like there's no use in me spending 5 hours with people when I can just do it once or have a video or something. So I started looking at my options. It was not a perfect, beautiful journey. I wish it was, but I eventually tried doing membership sites and courses and like all these different ways to scale from the one-on-one practice to a more leveraged model. And eventually I figured out about group programs, and I figured out my way of doing group programs, which it's just like anything, right? If you've done a course or even one-on-one, right? Like everyone has their way. So like I was trying to do it based on someone else's model. It wasn't until I figured out the pieces that I needed and wanted for myself that I like finally felt like, okay, this is amazing. But that was a huge aha for me. And that led me down that journey to now getting to teach what I teach now.
Right. I think what's so key is what you just said, is that you can follow someone else's model and there might be good elements in there, but you still need to find what works for you, because, we try to find coaches or mentors that are, kind of aligned with our values, but yeah, they might be different kind of people. And so what works for them doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you. So I think that's so key for the listeners who are, working with coaches or trying to find the coaches. Like, don't take everything they tell you for granted, because you still need to adapt it to your own life and business module.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful for all my coaches and mentors, and I'm grateful that I listen to myself.
Yeah.
And that's available to everyone, right?
And sometimes that means, doing it wrong the first time, because you only find out that that's not working if you're actually doing it, right? So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely been there. All right, let's talk about the 3 golden nuggets. So these are habits and internet resources and stuff that you do on a regular basis. So the first one is the habit, something that you do that you think contributes to your success.
Yeah, for me, it's definitely mindset work. So every single day, I do at least journaling, at the very least, where I will write down kind of like a dumping of everything going on in my brain. And then just really coaching myself through what I'm thinking and going through. So that's like number one key, like every single day.
Even on weekends.
Even on weekends.
Wow.
And sometimes a couple times a day. I always tell my clients, like, mindset work, and it doesn't matter like what your method is, right? Like some people like visualizing or whatever. I mean, whatever your flavor of that is, but it's like brushing your teeth, right? It's like, I'm not going to say I'm not going to brush my teeth today. Or, some days I have extra stinky breath, right? Like I had onions for lunch, right? I'm going to go brush my teeth again.
Right.
So like that's every single day, consistent. And I think it just helps me. I always think of it as like just getting my brain to be screwed on the way I want it to be and just being very intentional.
I like that. I'd like to call that a yin habit, and then something more yang oriented, you kind of like the more doing stuff. So something that you use online, a tool that you'd like to share.
Yeah. So my go-to tool is Asana, hands down, because it tells we have different projects within the business. And then based on what we're doing with each project, I know exactly what I need to do every single day in my business based on our processes, our projects, and like utilizing that tool. And then I know what everyone on my team is doing. So it's easy to manage them and make sure that they're working on the right outcomes.
Awesome. Yeah. Other people have mentioned that one before. So I think I just actually started using it. So I can't say whether I like it yet or not, but I definitely think since many guests have mentioned it before, it's definitely worth looking into. So I'll link to that. And then what kind of book would you recommend and why?
Yes. So depends how far down the rabbit hole you are. But I really loved reading Conversations with God. It's not a religious book, it's a spiritual book, but I think that's the book that has completely changed my life the most. It's a trilogy and really just allowing me to go to the depths of like, myself in a way that I never thought was possible.
Who's the author of that?
Neil Donald Walsh.
Neil Donald Walsh. Okay, well, we'll make sure to link to that. Thank you. Never heard of it or never read it either, so definitely going to check that out. We're coming to the end here, but I have still two very important questions. The first one is, what comes up for you when I say marketing with integrity?
Yeah, for me, that means listening to my intuition and honoring it.
So important, right? I mean, I find it always fascinating when I do recognize, oh, wait a minute, this is my gut talking. So just stop right here. If the gut says no, then it's a no. But sometimes the mind then is like, yeah, but what if? And, this is an opportunity. And then you're like, stop. No, remember the first thing that came up. That's what you need to listen to. Mm-hmm. Is it always very obvious to you, or do you sometimes do that as well, where the mind and the gut talk to each other?
No, it's like I'm very cerebral, like I call it, because I do the thinking, the thinking and the overthinking. Uh-huh. So it's been, like I said, more of like a spiritual journey for me to allow myself to tune in,
right.
And I think so many times for us that like we're introverts and we're smart, right? Like we're logical, right? Like that can be really hard because sometimes intuition has zero logic.
Yeah, I know. It's so hard to explain. And it's funny because I just recently discovered that I'm INFJ on Myers-Briggs, but I was like, well, what does that mean? And my husband always said, oh, it's your female intuition, right? It's kind of just this label. I'm like, well, I have other girlfriends who don't seem to have that. So yeah, that's when I really discovered, oh, so this is something, it's not tangible because, yeah, like you said, there's no logic to it, but it's something that I should pay more attention to because it's there for me. So,
Yeah, I have one of my assistants is an INFJ, and like for her, I think that feeling is really her superpower. So it's like I'm an INTJ.
I was sure, yeah.
Yeah, so like I go into thinking, right?
Yeah.
And I suppress feelings. So for her, when I am meeting with her, I will say like, how do you feel about this? Right? Like I'm very intentional to say about the feelings, because if that's not my strength, like we need to work together, right? On making that a cooperative relationship. And then what I think is so fascinating about her is how good she is with people. You know, she's just like incredible with people. She remembers so many things about so many people. She does all of our social media management. So it's just like, wow, this is such a beautiful gift, right? And me being the thinker, right? Like I want the process. And
you need both, ideally you
Yes.
have a team member out of each of the four letters, and then you're the perfect team.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Like social media, humans, and business is not only processes. Like I think that's a part of it, right? Obviously it's an important part too, but like so is the people and so are the feelings. And it's just been a really beautiful blend, like seeing that with our partnership.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, I think we could keep on going and going. But I want to ask the last question, which is kind of a mindful ending. So, what are you grateful for today or this week, Mariana?
Oh my gosh, it's going to make me want to cry, but just my children, and then being alive. We had a family member's best friend whose child died this week. And it's just like another cool thing mindset-wise. I've been reading a book about Stoicism, and I think it's called The Guide to the Good Life. In Stoicism, you practice like actually losing things that you love, right? And like, what could be more surreal of an experience than having this happen this week as I'm reading this book? And so I think for everyone, it's that sometimes in the day to day, we just take those things for granted, right? We think our child's going to wake up tomorrow, or we're going to wake up tomorrow. And instead, it's like, you know what? We are so lucky. Like we have another day. And that may seem really dark, but at the same time, it's like the most beautiful gift in the world.
Yeah, so true. And that's what I do on a daily basis, is having this, these three things you write down that you're grateful for. And then it's funny when you do things on the repetition, you're like, well, today I really can't think of anything. And instead, all you need to do is just, look at yourself, look at your hands, look at your feet, and I don't know, look outside. And there's so many things that we take for granted, like you said. And instead, we should be grateful for them. So, yeah, beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing this time with me and being my guest. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you, Mariana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Sarah.
That's it on this episode of the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast. You can find out more about Mariana at impactdrivenentrepreneur.com. And as always, you'll find this episode's show notes at sarahsanacroce.com/episode 77. And again, if you'd like to start marketing without anxiety, please join me on April 26th for the free one-page marketing plan workshop. You can register at sarahsanacroce.com/one page. That's one, the word one dash page. This is Sarah Sanacroce signing off from the Introvert Biz Growth Podcast. Remember, you need to use your unique introverted superpowers in order